Hey everyone, ready for another deep dive? Today we're tackling a topic that's pretty much revolutionized relationships. We're
Hmm.
talking about couples who choose to live together before marriage.
A big one. Yeah,
It used to be like this hush-hush thing, right? Like, oh my gosh, they're living in sin. But now it's like the norm.
totally.
Over 70% of couples in the US are cohabiting before they say, I do. That's wild compared to like our parents' generation.
Huge shift. Yeah.
So what's the deal? Is it just a trial run before the big commitment, or is there more to it?
Well, it's become so normal now, especially for younger people.
Yeah.
It's not seen as this rebellious thing anymore. I mean, the pressure to marry young, it's just not there as much.
Right.
And people are way more open to different ways of being in a relationship.
So it's almost like cohabitation is becoming a choice in itself, not just a stepping stone.
Yeah, exactly.
But if it's not just a test drive, then what is driving this trend? Like, what are the reasons?
It's definitely not just one thing.
Mm.
But for a lot of couples, it's a really emotional decision.
Yep.
Like living together lets them build this super strong connection.
How so?
You know, you see each other at your best and your worst. First thing in the morning, no makeup, no filters. That kind of vulnerability, that's powerful.
It's real, so it's about facing the everyday stuff together.
Exactly. Seeing if you can handle the stress of bills and chores and all of that.
Like a pressure cooker test.
Yeah, and you know what? For a lot of couples, going through those ups and downs together actually makes their commitment even stronger.
Makes sense.
Even if they don't have that marriage certificate. It's like, hey, we can get through anything, and we choose to do it together.
It's a crash course in compatibility.
Right.
Figuring out if you truly click, like emotionally and practically.
Right?
And speaking of practically, we got to talk about money. That's a big factor in relationships.
Absolutely. Huge. Especially for younger couples who are dealing with student loans and just the crazy cost of living these days.
It's tough out there.
Sharing expenses can be a lifesaver. Splitting rent, groceries, utilities, all of it makes a difference.
Yeah, for sure.
And a lot of couples say that sharing those financial responsibilities brings them closer. It's like they're
Ooh.
building a future together.
It's financial test drive
Yeah.
before the long-term commitment of a mortgage and all that.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And think about it. In cities where rent is sky high, living together lets couples experience that while easing the burden. Much
Smart.
easier to manage.
So we've got the emotional aspect, the financial side of things. But sometimes, let's face it, things aren't that deep, right? Like sometimes it's just about convenience.
Definitely. If you're already spending most nights at each other's places, it just makes sense.
Constantly going back and forth.
Exactly. It's like we're basically living together anyway, so why not make it official?
Keep it simple. Which makes me think, with all these practical reasons, where does culture fit into all of this? Societal norms still have a huge influence on relationships.
Culture's huge. I mean, different cultures view cohabitation so differently.
Oh, yeah.
Some see it as absolutely unacceptable before marriage. Others, it's totally normal, expected even. And even within the U.S., there are variations. Big cities tend to be more accepting, while more traditional communities, maybe not so much.
So it's this balancing act for couples, trying to figure out their own desires while navigating those expectations from family and community.
It can definitely cause some tension.
Big time. So communication is key, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Couples have to be open about their own views on living together and how that fits with their cultural background.
Finding that middle ground.
Yeah, where personal desires and those societal expectations can coexist.
Okay, so we've talked about how cohabitation isn't a one-size-fits-all thing. It's got these emotional layers, financial aspects, practicality, and cultural influences swirling around. But what does all this mean for the future of relationships? Is it changing the game?
That's where it gets really interesting. I mean, it makes you wonder, right?
Definitely makes you think.
Is cohabitation reshaping relationships as we know them?
Because it's not this radical out there thing anymore. It's becoming another way to be in a committed relationship.
Exactly. And that leads to some big questions about the future of marriage itself.
Like, are we moving towards a world where I do is replaced with move in?
That's a fascinating question. While marriage is still super important to a lot of people,
Yeah.
we might see marriage rates actually going down as more and more couples choose to cohabit.
Interesting.
Because it's becoming a real option for the long haul, not just a temporary thing.
So it's not just this like straight line anymore, right? Like marriage, house, kids.
Right.
It's more like couples are creating their own paths.
Exactly. And I think that could lead to even more diversity in relationships.
In what way?
Well, we might see more couples choosing to just live together long term.
Okay.
Some might decide to get married later on,
Mm-hmm.
and others might find something completely different that works for them.
So it's all about flexibility.
Exactly. But, with all this freedom and choice, things can get a little complicated, especially when it comes to the legal stuff and finances.
Yeah, because marriage has all those built-in protections. What about couples who are just living together?
That's a really important point.
Hmm.
Without that legal framework, cohabiting couples need to be way more proactive.
Like what kinds of things?
Well, think about property rights, inheritance, who makes
Yeah.
healthcare decisions. All that can get messy fast.
So it's not enough to be in love. You got to be practical too.
Exactly. Having those tough
Oh, it's
conversations.
about money and stuff.
Yeah, finances, long-term goals, even what happens if you break up.
No one wants to think about that.
I know, but it could prevent a lot of heartache later on.
So it's almost like cohabitation forces couples to be more upfront about their commitment,
Yeah, instead of just relying on tradition or what the law says.
taking charge of your own relationship.
Exactly. And building a partnership that truly reflects your values and needs, whether you have a ring or not.
Now, I know we can't give legal advice here,
Sure.
but are there resources out there for couples who are thinking about living together or already are?
Absolutely. Talking to a family lawyer is always a good idea.
Okay.
They can help you figure out things like cohabitation agreements, wills, powers of attorney,
Yeah.
all those documents that protect both partners.
Smart.
Yeah, and they can help you figure out what to do if any unexpected events happen.
So a little legal prep goes a long way.
Definitely worth it. Better to be safe than sorry.
You mentioned earlier that marriage rates might decline because of cohabitation, but do you think marriage is like becoming obsolete?
That's a question that sparks a lot of debate. Marriage rates are going down, it's true,
Yeah.
but I don't think marriage is going away completely. For a lot of people, it still has deep meaning.
Yeah.
It's a public declaration of love, a formal commitment. It's about culture and tradition for a lot of people.
So it's not like cohabitation is replacing marriage.
Right. They can both exist. It
Yeah.
really just depends on what's important to each couple.
Choice is good.
Exactly. The important thing is that people have the freedom to choose what works best for them.
It makes you wonder, though, as cohabitation becomes even more accepted,
Yeah.
will it eventually just become another normal path to partnership? Like alongside marriage?
That's an interesting thought. Maybe in the future, the lines between cohabitation and marriage will become less clear.
Hmm.
Maybe we'll focus less on the legal stuff and more on the relationship itself.
The quality of it.
Yeah, the commitment, the shared values, the connection between two people.
Imagine that. A world where commitment isn't about a piece of paper or a ceremony.
Right. It's about the bond between two people.
That's a future I can get behind. But for now, let's just appreciate that people have more options, right? Cohabitation shows us that relationships are changing and evolving.
It really does. It's all about how people connect with each other.
Exactly. But before we wrap up our deep dive into the world of cohabitation, I want to leave our listeners with something to think about. How has cohabitation changed the way you see relationships? Like, what does it mean for love and partnership? I know it's a big question,
Yeah,
but something to think about.
definitely. And like with any big societal change,
Yeah.
there are going to be some hiccups along the way.
Yeah.
But I think what's really important to remember,
What's that?
there's no one right way to do relationships anymore.
Right.
Whether you're thinking about living together, getting married, or something else entirely.
Yeah.
What really matters is finding what works for you and your partner. Something built on respect, shared values, and really understanding each other's hopes and dreams.
I love that. On that note, I think we're wrapping up our deep dive into cohabitation.
It's been a fascinating conversation.
I hope everyone listening enjoyed it as much as I did and maybe learned a thing or two along the way.
It was great to be here.
Thanks for joining us on the deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring and questioning and diving deep into the world around us.